Today we have a special episode for you guys. We have two retired police officers. We have Mike and Corey. Corey, I'll let them talk about themselves, and then we'll kind of just get into a conversation. I don't think we really have anything set planned that we want to talk about. But Corey, go ahead and introduce yourself to the Two Hats podcast family.
All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Like Chris said, my name is Corey. I was a former Virginia State Trooper, and I'm a retired Navy Chief Petty Officer. I did just a little over 20 years in the United States Navy. From there, I started my own business. I have my own restoration company now, and also started the asked Mike to partner up with me to start the Brothas-in-law. You know, with everything going on the last several years between the police and the communities, I just got tired of it and seeing good cops taking a lot of heat for things that, you know, they had nothing to do with. So, and also coming up with the acronym of CALM, which I'm sure we'll talk about throughout this podcast, which stands for comply, answer questions, listen, and move on. So we believe that if you follow these four principles here, if you get stopped by the police, there is no reason for you to end up hurt or dead. That means for as the citizen goes and the law enforcement officer goes. All right. And so that's our message to our viewers and actually to the whole country. We need to start preaching this CALM acronym to the people. So that's our mission and where we're headed with the Brothas-in-law.
All right, thank you. And just for you guys listening, Brothas-in-law is a podcast that's available on YouTube. You guys can go ahead and look it up. Brothers is spelled Brothas in law. And all right, Mike, why don't you go and introduce yourself to the family?
Sure. Glad to be on the show here. My name is Mike Bradley. Corey and I, childhood friends. We grew up together from Canton, Ohio. I was I'm an Army veteran. I was in the Army for 6 years and got to a point where I knew I didn't want to make a career out of the military. So I got out and I became a police officer. I'm now a retired police officer, 26 years in Northern California. Love the job, ups and downs to it, just like everything else. And when Corey hit me up about doing the show Brothas-in-Law, you know, I thought it was interesting. And I had always had the attitude of, but based on what's been going on the past couple of years with police and in the community, I just wanted to at least try to educate the community on what to do when they interact with police. Because a lot of times the basic citizens, they don't know the basics of what they're supposed to do. You know, right. Not too long ago, my mom, you know, she had got stopped by the police and she got out of the car and was, you know, flustered. And based on what's been going on in the media and the perceptions that they have in the media, she was actually afraid, you know, of what to do. You know, she really didn't know. So that's why I thought it was a good idea to hook up with Corey. And Corey asked me to do it, and I'm all on board for it.
All right. Just gotta give you a little background on myself and on Brittany. I served 5 years as a juvenile probation officer in Western Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh. I did that for 5 years, and then I moved down south, where I'm now an adult probation and parole officer down south, and I've been working this for about 3 years now. And specifically, I operate a drug treatment court. So that's my specialty that I operate. Brittany?
Okay, and me, I was an adult probation officer for almost 5 years in Texas, and I quit that last July 2020 during the pandemic. And yeah, so now I create content online, letting people know about probation and parole with Chris. And Chris, how long have we been doing our podcast? How long has it been now? Oh my gosh,
it's probably been maybe about 6 months or so.
I feel like it's been 6 years because Chris Chris gives me the blues. Y'all need to go listen to some of those old episodes. But yeah, that's what I do.
All right. So I want to start off real quick, and like I said, we don't have any set questions, but I want to ask you guys, what kind of experience do you guys have working with probation and parole officers, if any?
Well, for me, not a whole lot, tell you the truth. I mean, most of the time when we back on the street, when we dealt with somebody that's on probation, I mean, at the most, we're looking for probation violations. But even then, they've changed a lot in California as far as the things that we can do with probationers, as far as arresting them and booking them into jail. For instance, you can only book a probationer in jail if they have a second associated crime with it. You no longer can book them just on a probation violation. So as far as the probation officers go, that if I came into contact with a probation officer, it's like after the fact. So if I book somebody on probation for something and they have also probation violation, I'll usually call a probation officer and let them know. Hey, I just booked your guy for this, that, and the other. Basically, just to give them a heads up. Other than that, every once in a while, we'll have a probation officer that will want assistance from the police to do maybe a probation search at homes and stuff like that. They'll want a uniform presence there. But that's about the gist of it. Not a whole lot of interaction with probation officers on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's pretty much
positive.
What's that?
So were they at least positive?
Oh yeah, I can't say that I've ever had a probation officer that wasn't positive or anything like that. They're pretty, I mean, because they want a specific thing from you, and you want to just notify them of what's going on, or sometimes you have it where a probationer has some conditions that may not be listed or something like that in the system. So the probation officer would be the best place to go to make sure you know what specific conditions they have. It's been my experience with probation officers that they've always been forthright. They've always been, very cooperative with whatever I need. And I try to be cooperative with whatever they need when I do interact with them. So overall, a positive interactions with probation officers.
That's great. Corey?
Well, I'm a little bit different because, operating at the state level, we do things a little bit different. If I had any interaction with somebody had a parole violation, we address that issue. But my primary issue is whatever our interaction resulted in. Like Mike said, our relationship with them is still, a great relationship. Now I might have some interaction with them in the court aspect of it, talking with the parole officer after a case is over, and make sure we have all our I's dotted and T's crosses in that aspect. But over the years, it maybe half a dozen times I had, some type of interaction with probation. We always have a positive working relationship, with us. So, it's never been a real issue or a button heads with the two agencies.
All right, that's good. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. If you listen to our previous episodes, talking to some other probation officers that we've interviewed from across the country, sometimes the relationship their department and local police have can be strained. And I think touches a little bit about what Mike was saying, is that sometimes the issue is there's what the probation officer wants and there's what the police officer wants. And sometimes they don't understand what the powers each person has, what each person can do, and what the objective is of both parties. So if we need help with a search, sometimes the departments are like, we don't want to be bothered with it. As opposed to there's some departments that are, okay, we'll be there, no problem whatsoever. And then of course there's times where the police will contact the probation and say, hey, listen, we've been watching your guy, we think he's doing XYZ. Hey, can you guys go ahead and do a search on him? And it's like, oh, well, you don't really want anything to do with us until you want our Fourth Amendment waiver powers.
Right. They don't want to do the report. They don't want to do the paper. You know what I'm saying?
This is true. I understand. So it's kind of like, we're just trying to work on trying to build that relationship and trying to, wrinkle out those differences. But of course, the problem is that things are different everywhere you go across the country. The rules and regulations are different. Like I understand from Mike, what you're saying out in California, you guys have access to the probation conditions and you guys can look into that and see if they're violating. Where I'm
Mhm.
at, the local police don't have that. The only thing they have is if they run that person's name through the system, they'll see that they're on probation. They'll see who
Yeah.
their probation officer is and that probation officer's contact information,
Yeah.
but they don't know what their conditions are, what they have to do outside of the standard conditions of probation stuff.
Wow. Wow.
Um,
That's
so
big.
normally, yeah. So normally, what I would get is sometimes I get a phone call from the officer to leave me a voice message on my office saying, "Hey, I came across your guy. This and this happened. I just want to let you know." But there's a lot of times where I just won't get any kind of phone call, and then next thing I know, I get an alert my guy's in the jail. You know,
And
so
that's what we try to avoid. We don't want to drop you with that surprise. I'd rather call you beforehand, say, just let you know and give you a heads up. Hey, I booked your guy for this, that, and the other.
yeah, exactly.
That's interesting that y'all don't have, the police don't have access to the conditions, because that's the main part of probation. Without knowing the conditions, how can any action be taken? I know in California, like I was saying, you can't book somebody specifically on a probation violation, but if you arrest them for something else, you can add on that probation violation as an additional charge if you know what those violations are. So that's big right there.
See, that's just like I said, it's one of those law differences from state to state. Because here in where I'm at, the local police says they don't have access to conditions too. They can't violate anybody. Only the probation officer can violate, or the parole officer can violate them for their conditions. Now, of course, the police can arrest them on new charges all day long. That's not a problem. But if it's like they have let's say one of their conditions is they have a curfew, they have to be in the house by 7 o'clock, and you're interacting with them at 10 p.m. Local police can't say, "Well, I'm going to arrest you for that," because they wouldn't know. They just wouldn't know. Only thing they will know is when they run that person's name that they are on probation and who their probation officer is and the probation officer's phone number and email address. That's about it. And of course, if you're contacting them at 10 o'clock at night, I'm asleep. So
yeah.
We'll talk about it in the morning.
Are your agencies doing anything to bridge that gap to where, if you have that type of interaction, and it's more or less to be probably to protect the parolee, so he doesn't get any more charges, trumped up on him in that instance. So do the two entities trying to work together to work this thing out?
I don't believe so. I've never heard of anything like that, where I think it's I think everybody tries to stay in their own lane until they need the interaction. It's like that image of those two circles that overlap. It's kind of like you stay in your part of the circle, I stay in my part of the circle. But when they overlap, that's kind of when we'll do something. Brittany, how's it in Texas, Brittany?
It's pretty much the same as where you are. Like the police, they don't have access to any of those type of documents on probationers. They don't know what's going on.
Wow. And I think, in my opinion, I think that's important for probation and police to have some kind of ongoing communication, open relationship with each other, because the police are most of the time are going to be the first ones in contact with the probationer when they do something wrong, when or if they do something wrong. So that information, such as violations, probation violation. I mean, a lot of times, not a lot, but I shouldn't say a lot. There have been times where I've come across a probationer, and because I didn't have an additional charge on them, it might be a situation where I know they were getting ready to do something bad, either about to commit a crime or something like that. And I know that they are on probation. There have been times when I have called the probation officer, and they can't, like you said, they can violate the probation right there based on what I'm saying to them over the phone. And they say, yeah, go ahead and violate it, but I can't do that obviously without the probation officer's approval, because it's the probation officer that's doing it, and I don't have an additional crime that I'm arresting the probationer for. Now, that doesn't happen often. I don't have that situation often. Most of the time, I'm usually arresting them for something else in addition to a probation violation. But that is important, I think, for those out here in California. It's nice to be open with the probation officers, a good relationship with probation and police. because they work together on things that even though they may not be physically together, right? They still, the information is joined. It should be, in my opinion, you know.
Mhm. Now, Corey, with you being a state trooper, is it common for you that you would run across probationers or parolees that have active warrants while you're conducting your traffic stops?
No, I would say I was more of a city guy. So now if you were a trooper that was assigned to like a county area as well as portions of the interstate, then yeah, you're more likely to run into that type of someone who's on probation. Majority of people that I would come in contact with and deal with would be what we call our SORs, sexual offenders registry, and the we even call it the parole that they'll be on, that they have to follow by. So that was more our thing. We kind of really stuck more in line with that, but very seldom, what I get with somebody that had a well, if they have an active warrant, that's different. You're going to jail, hands down. There's no cutting through that, but we would just handle it accordingly. Just like you are, it's very limited on information. That's why I was asking, are they working on, like Mike was saying, the lines of communication to make it better? Because if you're very limited on the information. Because a lot of times I just ask, hey, do you have your paperwork on you? And sometimes it works out, they have it on them, and we can weed through the process. Because like the last thing we want to do is spend the rest of our shift in lockup, wasting time. Well, of course it keeps you off the road, but that's just more paperwork you got to get involved in, and taking up more of your time and possibly carrying you to overtime. But that's okay in some points. But yeah, I mean, it varies. I mean, it'd be hard to put a percentage on it, what that interaction is. To your point.
Yeah, for us, I mean, yeah, it was, I don't know, common might be a strong word, but every once in a while you come across a traffic stop with somebody on probation or something or you come in contact with somebody on probation and they do have a warrant. Yeah, that happens. I mean, in that case, yeah, you can, but you don't have to have an additional charge to book them if they have a warrant. So if they got a warrant, but you know what? In that case, when it's a warrant, maybe by the probation officer or something like that, I may not call a probation officer, because the probation officer, they're going to find out that they were booked, obviously, at some point. So it's not something where I surprisingly came across this person and they were doing something unrelated to their probation. So yeah, it happened. It happens when you come across people, you book them on probation warrants. That can happen in California.
So the next thing I want to talk about is, for those watching on YouTube, of course, those definitely listen to our other platforms like Spotify or Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts. Can't see our screens right now, but we're all four of us are minorities. We're all African American. How important do you think it is that African Americans and minorities are represented in the law enforcement field? I'm proud that all four of us are African American. I like that. I
think for me, that's very big. I think there needs to be more of a conscious effort of including African Americans in all forms of law enforcement. And for me, since I was a patrol officer, basically a street cop, I'm going to say I would really like to see more Black folks on the street cop level, because those are the first ones that you're going to come into contact when you call the police. That's the first face you're going to see. That officer is going to be the one that's going, based on his or her perception, is going to react to a particular situation, how they will react to it. I think that's important, and a conscious effort needs to be made to hire African Americans. Now, one of my questions is why the other side to that coin, I think, is you have a lot of African Americans that are hesitant or just have no desire to be police officers. And I've talked to some like that, and their reasonings were based on history. I mean, they just think that the police are just historically bad and they historically are racist. And I can't find a department that's going to have enough Black people for me to go work there. Things like that. I mean, and we got to get away from that. I want to see on all departments. You can't look at a department and say, well, that department is too white, for lack of better words. Okay. Get on the departments, get out there, get on the street in uniform. I want to see more African Americans as cops on the street dealing with issues. I think that's very important. We got to get away from just every time you call the police, you have a 90% chance of a white face showing up. Now, I think that's starting to change, but it definitely hasn't changed enough. We still need more of that to come.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And on the state level for us, they've gotten a lot better at that, hiring more minorities. So we had a very strong presence of African Americans in our office. But when you stretch this out, it doesn't seem like that. There's a lot. And but the thing is, we like to see that, and we know we'll be more respected in the communities for that. But the ones who aren't going to give a rat's ass, I can't even say that, can I? Those who aren't really going to care about that are the criminals, right? They're not going to care what color you are. They're still going to violate, right? But the overall citizen, it will make the world a difference. Because I know I've done traffic stops and people have said, well, thank God you Black. I'd say, well, what difference does that make? I said, you do something stupid, you coming out that car. So at that point, I don't care what color you are, right? Don't do nothing stupid. You ain't gonna have no problems. So, but that's the mentality of some of the people in the community. Like Mike was saying, you want. Let's see how I can say this without getting in trouble with.
Careful, Corey.
I know. Go ahead, man. Because I ain't.
No, I mean I hear what you're saying, and this is like you say, it's meant to be a wide open question, obviously.
Yeah.
It's just that it's important to get that perception away, that perception of when I call the police, it's the white guy showing up all the time. Historically, it has always been the white guy showing up. Okay. And when you have a situation, particularly in a Black family, and I hate to do this as far as, a Black family scenario might be different than a white family scenario purely because of the race. That's not the case. Okay. But when you're showing up to a family who has an issue, historically, you have always seen the white face that shows up when you call 911, and there may be some people that naturally have, a negative perception of the white guy showing up to handle their problem. You see what I'm saying? I think we just got to get away from that. I think it should be less of a percentage of that than it is now. That's all. And it's important, not just Black folks. We're Black, so we're talking about Black people, but minorities in general. It's important to have more minorities in the police force. And just a conscious effort should be made to make sure that that's right. In the agency that I was in, for a long time, I was actually the only Black officer in that whole department for a long time. Not the only minority, but the only Black officer in that whole department. That has since changed, but it wasn't because of lack of trying to hire Black people. I had an agency where we were actively trying to hire Black people. It's just that they either weren't interested in coming, whatever, or they couldn't pass a background investigation or something along those lines, which that applies to everybody, okay, not just Black people. But there are a multitude of reasons why we just couldn't get Black faces on the department for whatever reason. And I think, like I said, on the other side of that coin, I think you got some other Black people got to realize, if you want to be a police officer, be a police officer. And there are good in positives, and there are positives and negatives to being a police officer, to that career. But it's definitely not a career like everything else. It's definitely a very different and specific kind of career. But it's a good career. So I try to encourage anybody who is a person of color who wants to be in law enforcement. I try to encourage them. Today, it's difficult. It's obviously difficult to be a police officer today. A lot of changes are going to come, I think, compared to what they were. But it's still, I think, a good career for someone to get into, starting around the ages of, 24, 25, around that age group. And, it's important.
Yeah,
Mike, I can definitely just real quick, Corey. Mike, I can relate to you when I first started probation in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, which is right below Pittsburgh. We're talking a rural county that is, I think it was 95% Caucasian. In my department, there was only 2 of us out of, I think, 35 probation officers. There's only 2 African American officers, and I think we were just it. There were no other minorities. It was just me and her, and I think she started 6 months before me. So it wasn't like they had a track record here. And of course, they assigned me, the only Black male officer in the whole department, to the one inner city that we had in the county. So, but you know what? I enjoyed it. I felt like I was more relatable to those juveniles. When they saw Black faces, their PO, they kind of relate. I try to be a role model to them, to show them, you don't have to, go down the path you're going. It's still, early enough for you guys to make a change. And I still kind of keep that going now, even though where I'm at now, the county I'm in now is the opposite. I want to say it's like 65% African American, probably like 30% Hispanic, and the rest Caucasians. And most of my department now is, in the county I am, is mostly African American. So it's a big switch from where I was.
That sounds like it.
But like I said, it's when I was working in Westmoreland County, I would go into court, and the only Black faces in the court would be me and my juvenile delinquent. White judge, white DA, white public defender, white deputy sheriffs, white court reporter. Everyone in the room is white. Man, when I came down to where I am now, and I first went to court, everything's Black. Everybody was Black, and it was amazing. It's a different kind of feeling when you see that. So yeah, I can definitely relate to you on that. How was it down there with you, Brittany? I think you were like the Houston area.
Yeah, it's a lot of Black folks. It's great. I would probably say like 60% Black people. So I felt very comfortable.
Yeah, I've never had that. I mean, I got hired and retired from the same agency. And I've never had that. I mean, you've seen Black faces throughout my career in different positions, not necessarily in my agency, but in the courts, working with other agencies of anything I might do or something like that. There are some agencies that have a whole lot more Black people than the agency that I was in. I was in an agency that was about 25 miles east of Oakland. Obviously, when you go to Oakland Police Department, you have a whole lot more Black officers with the Oakland Police Department than you did in the department that I was in. I was near that 580, 680 interchange, for those of you who might be familiar with Northern California, in that area, in the Bay Area. But for the longest, I was the only Black face in my department. And for me, I mean, I can't really say it felt uncomfortable. I mean, Black folks have been used to going to agencies or companies, whatever your line of work is, where you are not, you're the minority and most of the employees are white. I mean, Black folks have been doing that for decades. We've always had to work in environments where you may not have a lot of people in that company or agency or whatever you work that look like you. You see what I'm saying? But for me, it wasn't uncomfortable. I did the job. The guys that I worked with, I got a lot of respect for. I learned a lot from. I never felt like I was the Black guy in the department. You know, I always felt like I was an officer in the department. You know what I'm saying? So that's fortunate for me. I don't know if that's the same experience. I'm sure that's probably not the same experience for everybody that's in that kind of situation. But for me, it was. So I don't have anything bad to say about that aspect. And slowly but surely, some other Black people started to come on. Took a long time, but they started to come on to the force. And it is what it is. But
just to give some perspective, what year did you start in law enforcement?
I started when I was 24, so that was been 94. And I retired just last year, August of last year. Loved the department I worked for, loved the community, loved their department. So, you know, I didn't work in a community where you hit the street and you had everybody flipping their middle finger at you or throwing something at you, something like that. You know what I'm saying? The community supported their police department a big deal, which is not the case in every city. I understand that. So, I mean, it is what it is. But back to what your original question was, yeah, I would love to see more Black people as police officers.
But people who are kind of like opposed to it or scared, Corey, what kind of advice would you give them to make them feel more at ease, like they could do it too? And they should do it.
And yeah, and they should. I mean, they have to, first of all, they have to follow their heart. For me, being in law enforcement is something that I always wanted to do ever since, Mike and I, we were growing up. I wanted to be in law enforcement in some type of way, either was, being an attorney or probation officer, FBI agent, something. I had to be something within law enforcement, but then that all changed. And because I started out going into college first and then ended up in the military. But that's another whole segment within itself. But I would say follow your heart, follow what's passion, what you're passionate about. I mean, Mike would tell you that he never wanted to be in law enforcement, but that all changed. But I mean, it's something I think that it's within you. It's for me, it's who I am. I am law enforcement, even though I'm no longer with the department. We're doing this brother-in-law because that's that burning passion still in me that wants to still make a difference. I like to feel like every time I was going to make a traffic stop, I was, saving somebody's life, making a difference within their life. So if you're that person and that's how you want to impact change, then yeah, by all means, be a police officer. It's a dangerous profession, yes. But at the end of the day, when you think and you look back of what you've done, I mean, it's a very rewarding profession, and we need good law enforcement officers that look like the four of us.
What do you say to people who think Black people in law enforcement, they call them sellouts? What's your take on that?
I think the ones who are saying that are the sellouts,
Okay.
because you're selling your own race short.
True.
You're doing all the talk, but you ain't taking none of the action.
Facts.
Right.
Yeah.
So we always talk about making a difference. And one of our videos, Mike and I talked about, I think it was characteristics of a good officer. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong.
It might have been that one.
Where we talk about, that type of characteristic, which you need to be a good officer. And that's what we have to get over, because I've been called the Uncle Tom. Oh, you a sellout. You one of the so-called good old boys. You and that good old boy in that work. Like, no, I'm out here trying to make a difference. I'm not gonna sit behind a cell phone and complain about, oh, the police this, the police that. No, you want to pack change, you get your butt up and go do it.
Yes.
Be that probation officer, be that law enforcement officer, be the county clerk, be a sheriff deputy. You be something. This is how we put an end to this so-called police just gunning down Black folks, and which is a lie, on a daily basis. You want to pack change, get off your rear end and go do something. Quit complaining about it and do something.
Hey, you know what? It's difficult though today because of what you see in the media. A lot of these young people today, what they see in the media, it's no longer cool to be a cop. In their eyes, unfortunately, not in every young folk today, but in too many young people today, I think that in their eyes, being a police officer is a negative thing because they see negative things on TV. And they may not even have personal experiences that are negative, them personally, but because of what they see on television, I think they think that it's no longer cool to be a police officer. It's no longer an honorable position to be a police officer. It's no longer, people don't look up to police officers anymore, or they don't trust police officers anymore. And I think because of all those negativity things coming at you, they are just naturally going to develop a false perception that the police are the enemy. And that's what Corey and I want to change and in some way try to change that perception. And that's difficult to fight. The media is strong, man. When you create something and you see it on the screen in front of you, these young folks today with social media and everything going on, it's a tough thing for them to battle to try to get into law enforcement. You might have some young folks out there really, wanting to get into law enforcement, but because of their peers and what they see on the screen telling them otherwise, they probably shy away from it. And that's sad. We need law enforcement in all aspects of it, right? So I'm sorry.
I was just saying, that was our video we did the week before last, media versus the police. And we talk about that very same thing. You can't, these young folks, and I'm sure you guys experience in your side of the field as well. You got a lot of these folks out here letting somebody else's perspective be their reality, and you can't do that. So for us, on every traffic stop, I've been said, somebody said to me once before on a traffic stop, and they were Black, like, hey, you ain't gonna shoot me, are you? Hey, well, what kind of sense does that make? Why would I shoot you? For what? Are you going to threaten me or any type of way? Well, no. I said, okay, well, why am I gonna shoot you? So there is that mentality that these folks are hearing from the media and from somebody else, and making it their reality that this is going to happen to them. And so, like Mike said, it's uphill battle, and we got to be able to fight that battle. And I'm sure it's probably that same way for you guys as well. Getting it from the probation folks of, oh, you just out here to harass me because I'm on probation. You out to, you know what I mean? I've heard you.
That's everybody, right?
Am I right? Do you hear that? Have you guys heard that?
All the time. You just waiting for me to mess
Why
up.
y'all harassing me? Because it's my job to do a search, man. I can imagine. It's funny because, like Corey was saying, I'm not one of those guys who always wanted to be a police officer. I never even thought about it. Growing up, I can't even remember. I might have had one incident with police that and I was in the wrong with it growing up, and I was like 17 years old. But from where I'm from, I just didn't have a lot of interaction with police at all. You know what I'm saying? And
we never did anything to get in trouble either.
That's true. We were pretty decent kids. We never really got into no real type of stuff to get the cops called on you. But Yeah, well, you got to look at where we were from too. I mean, people just didn't call the cops like that in our neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? It just wasn't something that happened. But at any rate, I didn't decide to be a cop until I was getting ready to get out of the military. I was 6 years in the army, and it's like, okay, if I'm gonna get out, I'm gonna get out now. Or if I re-enlist, well, I might as well make a career out of the military, because once you start going north to 6 years, well, you putting half a career in there already. So, and it was a buddy of mine in the army that said, "Hey, man, let's go to the academy. Let's put ourselves through the police academy." And I was like, I thought about it for a while. I knew I didn't want to stay in the army. And the police department, the way that was structured, it was similar to the way of life of the military in some ways. So I thought that would have been an easy transition. And I've always been a kind of like a people person, where I had strong communication with people, communication skills with people. And I felt that was something that I could easily transition over to. So that's what I did. Put myself through and got hired and been there ever since. But if to young people today, if they want to be in that law enforcement career, number one, I say get to know your own police department where you live. Okay. Know the names of the officers that patrol your particular neighborhood. Get to know them. Do a ride along with them. You know what I'm saying? See what a day in the life of a patrol officer is like in your neighborhood, in your city. Some police departments have something called like citizens academies or youth academies, like during the summertime, where you go. It's like a condensed little police academy for your particular local agency. And they teach you things about what that agency does, every unit in that agency, and what they do on the street or in the department, the internal workings of the department itself. So I encourage young people to expose themselves to law enforcement outside of what they see on the media, outside of what they see on social media. Get to know your police department, and then make an educated decision as to whether or not that's a career you would be interested in. If you do have that interest in it, by all means, go forward. It's a great community. It's a great career. You get a pension. If you make it to retirement, you get a pension. You get great benefits, great pay, depending on what part of the country you working in. That's high paid. In California is obviously one of the higher paid states than like Ohio. Ohio, I'm not like, I don't know about that, but it depends on what your cost of living is. So you can't really look at it like that, right? But I encourage young folks to get into it. Get into it, learn about it, get exposed to it, know all about it, and then make an educated decision of going to do it, whether that's probation, whether that's police officer, whether that's something working in the courtroom, whatever that is. Get exposure to it and learn about it on your own. Don't listen necessarily to social media and what you see on TV.
But listen to our podcast, though, okay? Because
Right.
Right. That's it.
That's what's up.
I think part of the problem, as we're getting into the whole, law enforcement, policing, even probation and parole, I think part of the problem is like when I grew up, I mean, I grew up in the 80s, so it wasn't like it was a long time ago. But I think part of the problems today is that, and it kind of has to go along too with getting more minorities in law enforcement, is that a lot of the police officers now, they don't even live in the cities that they work in. And I think that this kind of creates a disconnect, because whereas opposed to if you work somewhere, if you live in the same place where you work, you already kind of have that built-in respect where the community kind of already knows you, right? And you already know the community. You know that's little JoJo. You know that he acts a fool, but his grandma lives 2 doors down. So if you run into him on the streets and you have a problem, you take him 2 doors down, let his grandma handle him, because she will, as opposed to, I think nowadays it's kind of like you have officers that don't even live in the same county, not even less than even the same town or city. They don't even live in the same county. And then it feels to those residents that these officers are coming in and kind of being an occupying force, because they're not from there. They don't know the culture of that city. They don't know the residents. Like when I was a juvenile officer, I lived in the county, but where they assigned me was the northern part of the county, and I lived in the center part of the county where my office was. That's not my fault. That's where they assigned me. That's the caseload they gave me. That's where they told me to go. So yeah, I would have a little bit of conflict with those youths. Well, you're not from here. You don't really know what goes on here. I'm like, man, I've been working here long enough that I pretty much know a lot of people. You know, I might not live here, but I know a lot of you guys. I know who's related to who, who's family, you know, all that stuff. Where I currently am right now, I live in the same city that I work in, and I think that is a positive. So I think one, it gives me more I'm more invested in what happens. You know what I mean? Like, you know, in terms of you know, holding people accountable, because I'm realizing if you're out there, you're on my caseload and you're out there, you know, doing what you're doing, committing crimes, violating, eventually that's going to affect somebody I know or love because you were all in the same space, you know. So I'm going to do what I have to do. You know, in terms of holding you accountable. But I know there's a lot of officers that I work with in my apartment that live the next county over, you know. So I can see people, you know, I can see how they can feel like, well, you don't live here, you're just coming in here to boss me around, tell me what to do. So do you guys think that's a problem? Because like growing up, most of the officers that I interacted with when I was in middle school and high school, all on a friendly level, they all lived in the same town that I grew up in. You know what I mean? So there was always that connection. But I feel like now things are more, I don't know if this is a numbers game where, you know, departments can't get the numbers, they can't find people in that city that want the job. So they have to kind of open it up to surrounding areas. And like I said, and you get that occupying army type mentality that citizens have. Um, like what's the example? The shooting that happened outside of Minneapolis, the one that happened with I can't remember his name, Dwight Brown, where the girl mistaked her taser for the gun.
Yeah.
DeAndre, right?
Yeah.
That entire police department, not a single one of them lived in that city. The entire police department. That to me is a problem.
You know,
Well,
I'll go ahead, Corey.
I don't. It's hard to say that now. For us, it was you had to live within so many air miles from your area office, which was, I think it was 20 air miles you had to live within other office. Now this is on the state level. City level, I don't think there was any restriction on where they could live first distance wise from the precinct. I just think it just has to do with cost of living, where you're going to, you know, they have to look at their family's perspective too, their wives or husbands' perspective, you know, schools, doctors' offices. It's a lot of things that they have to look at as to where, you know, where they're gonna, you know, live. And everybody's not gonna live within the inner city. You know, it's just not gonna happen. I mean, we make decent enough money. I'm not gonna live on the other side of the railroad tracks. I'm not gonna put my family in harm and then be work in harm. Yeah, it doesn't make good sense. I mean, but I see what you're saying. But even still, even in that situation with Mr. Wright and her, just because they didn't live in that area, it still would not have stopped him from doing what he was doing, which was resisting. Because he had already had that made up in his mind what he was going to do. And even still, even if they lived in that area, that still doesn't mean that they would have known him. Like, and Mike would tell you here in just a second, because he's a city cop, and they're assigned that certain area. So, you know, they're going to be out and about getting to know the folks in that community. And on a state level, you know, if I wasn't working in the county somewhere, I mean, I'm up on the interstate, but we don't have jurisdiction. So even though I'm assigned to the interstate, I can jump off the highway and get violators within city limits throughout the whole state. I can go wherever I want, but I was assigned to that area. But that's part of, you need to get out and know the people within your community. So it doesn't matter if you live, you know, outside the city limits, you know, in the next 2 counties away. You still can get out there and get to know be proactive. The officers need to be proactive within those communities. So I don't really necessarily think that you have to live within, X amount of miles from the precinct or in the hood to make a difference, right?
A lot of the police officers I know, they don't even want to live near their job. They feel like it's an oasis where I can go and, be off work and at home away. Chilling. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting ready to say.
Yeah. Go ahead. Tell us, Mike.
No, I mean, I was one of those officers that I chose not. Well, number one, like Corey was saying earlier, the cost of living of where I worked, I couldn't afford to live, buy a house in the city that I worked in. And the areas I could afford were not really desirable areas that I would want to live in. I mean, just to be real, whether I was a cop or not, they were not desirable areas that I would want to live in. And if you make enough money, you can afford to provide a decent place for your family to live. And where you grew up or where you from is not always the best place for you to raise your family anymore. It might have been when you were growing up there, but it may not be as you're an adult. So that was one of the reasons I couldn't afford to. The other reason is when I drove around the city I worked, it was work. It looked like work. It felt like work. It was always work. So at the end of my 10, 12-hour shift or longer, when I left my work, I wanted to leave work. I didn't want to see work. I didn't want to see the city that I worked in. I didn't want to see the people that I dealt with. I didn't want to see them anymore. I wanted to get on that highway and go to a whole different city, a whole different county. Okay. I lived in a whole different county and I felt home. Where I live now, I ain't got no connection as far as a law enforcement connection, that is, to the community that I live in the sense that I'm always looking at something that I need to correct or enforce, or somebody that I dealt with, or I just took to jail yesterday, or something like that. That was my thing. That's why most cops don't live where they work, because number one, it can be unsafe if you dealing with people that you arrest, or you dealing with people that you had negative contacts with, which you will have plenty of negative contacts in your career, obviously. You don't want them to see you and your wife and kids going in the Safeway and them coming up to you saying, "Hey, man, you arrested me yesterday and I didn't agree with that. I ain't trying to get into that." You see what I'm saying? So that was the main reason why I definitely did not want to live where I work. Now, that being said, I do understand that there can be advantages to that. I just wasn't willing to accept those advantages and do the opposite of what I wanted to do. That was the big thing for me. But like Corey was saying, whether or not you live there or not, as a patrol officer, you need to know the area that you patrol. You need to know the important people that live in the area that you patrol. You need to know your area in the city that you patrol. That's what a good patrol officer does. And you need to treat them with respect, just like you treat anybody with respect. There's a time and a place for being authoritative, and there's a time and a place for just being non-authoritative, if you will, for lack of better words. And if you develop a good relationship where the citizens get to know you, whether or not you live in that city or not, they get to know who you are. They get to know what they can expect from you and what they cannot expect from you. Then I think it really doesn't matter whether or not you live there or not, because they know you enough, that it's almost like you live there in their eyes, because they see you all the time. You see what I'm saying? They make a point to get to know you. You make a point to get to know them, which can be difficult on the police officer side. And I'll tell you why. A lot of times when I was on the street, I would do what they call consensual contacts, which is just, you go up and say hi to somebody, get out your car. You see somebody playing in the park, or a picnic in the park or something. I used to get out my car and go over to and introduce myself. Hey, I'm Mike Bradley. I'm one of the guys that patrol your area during this time. You know, you guys having the picket out here. Some people feel that that's confrontational. Some people naturally, when they see a uniformed police officer approach them, they automatically think, okay, this guy about to act up, about to tell me something that I can't.
That's me. That's
you
how
know
I
what I'm
feel.
saying? And that's not the case all the time. That might be sometime, but that's not the case all the time. I'm just here to let you guys see me. You know what I'm saying? That's I used to do that stuff all the time. And that's important because that's all about developing a relationship, a positive relationship with the community. Now, it can be difficult also because everybody knows that being a police officer on the street during your shift is not all how you doing, have a good day. There are going to be some times where you're going to have to be authoritative. It is your job to enforce the law, and you have to be safe. There are things that I do or interact with the community that may come across as controversial or in their eyes too authoritative. But that's because that's a tactic that I'm trying to be safe and keep you safe, and I'm trying to be safe because I want to go home at the end of the day too. You know what I'm saying? So that's all. Go ahead, Corey.
What state though? It's hard. We can't get away like that. So I mean, like I said, you had to live within a certain radius of your area, your office. But at the same time, we went home with our vehicles, where most people don't. They share vehicles. No, not us. When you graduate the academy, you leaving with that vehicle that day, and it's your responsibility. So, I could never get away, no matter how far I move. They see that car out there in my driveway. They come knocking at the door. Hey, troop. Yeah, I found this wallet. Okay, what you want me to do with it? I'm in shorts and t-shirts and flip flop. Okay, what you want me to do with it? Call the city cops, right? Call them to come tell them, take it down there. Why I just thought because you live 3 doors down from me, I just come give it to you. I don't want it. You know what I mean? So it was so hard for us to really get away from it, because they say you got that car. And some city guys, I think for our area here, the guys, once they're, I think it's 5 or 6 years, they've been on the force, they can have a take-home car. But for state, I mean, that blue and gray sitting out in your driveway, you're going to get some knocks on your door. So I always carried a friend with me to the door because I don't know who's coming knocking. You don't come knocking on my door, man. That's that. I just for state, you just couldn't get away. Like I said, they're gonna come knocking on your door. But I see your point. It can be some frustration, like they think that cops should live in that area, but like we said, it depends on a lot of different varieties.
And then here's the negative side. Here's the negative side to that. What if you do work in an area that you from, right? And Miss Robinson know you when you was in the 8th grade. She knew you from way back in the day, right? Or little Kenny down the street, man, we grew up playing basketball together, whatever it is, right? But now you in a position of authority, okay? So if I got to give you a ticket, well, yeah, it's going to feel odd. I'm going to feel weird giving somebody a ticket that I've known for a long time, right? If I have to, right? More than likely for me, somebody like that, if I've known you for a long time, I'm probably not going to give you a ticket, but you can't go through the whole shift doing that either. You know what I'm saying? You might come across 10 people that you knew growing up or whatever, but you might have to take some authoritative stuff or actions. Maybe you got to arrest somebody that you knew growing up. I don't want to have to do that. I don't want to be in a position to do that. If I got to go to a domestic violence call and little Kenny down the street that I knew growing up beat the mess out of his wife, I really don't want to be in a position where I got to arrest little Kenny because I knew this dude growing up and he was a cool dude. We had a good relationship. Or I knew the wife growing up and now I'm in their personal business because I know all about what happened between you and your wife and who got arrested and all the details of it. Some people may not want me to know that because I did have a relationship with them growing up. You see what I'm saying? Or I am from that area and I know the area real well. And I don't want to be in a position where I gotta now not be that Mike from the block that y'all knew. And I gotta be Mike, I gotta be Officer Mike now and do something different. So
with probation, you don't even have to. Oh, I'm sorry, to cut you off.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I know with probation, if you have somebody on your caseload who you knew or who you know or you're related to, you have to get that case switched out. We can't even supervise them. But how is it where you are, Chris? It's the same way, right? You can't supervise people you know, friends, family.
It's something that you would discuss with your supervisor. I've never had that issue. Well, one, I'm not originally from here, so I really don't know. I can't say I know a lot of the people that lives here. But I mean, I do have friends. I'm in a fraternity. I have a lot of frat brothers that live in the city. I'm sure if I came across a situation like that where, when I'm end up in my caseload, I'd be like, hey, I gotta change this person out because this ain't gonna work,
But do they even allow it? Is it allowed if someone were related?
Honestly, I don't know. I can't particularly recall seeing that anywhere in a policy. I mean, we do have on familiarity training, and of course there's PREA, Prison Rehabilitation Act, which does a lot with undue familiarity with people and things like that. But I can't necessarily recall that I've seen a policy about that. But I'm pretty sure it's a situation where you just talk to your supervisor and get it transferred to somebody else's caseload. But
have you ever supervised a celebrity? This is so off topic.
No, I want to know that.
Ain't no famous people here.
Oh, no. Really? There was a few famous people that came through my office. I didn't supervise them personally, but yeah. I think it was kind of cool.
Do they get treated any differently?
Heck. You know what?
You know they did. You ain't got a front. You know they did.
My first instinct is to say, of course not. Of course they don't get treated differently, but you know how it go.
Yeah. I tell you what, I didn't know till after the stop, but I had gave my daughter's best friend a speeding ticket, reckless driving at that. And I didn't even know what it was him until after the fact. I said, man, why didn't you say something? It's like, oh, it's all right. It's like, all right, just come to court, man. We'll take care of it. And so I immediately got on the phone and called my daughter. It's like, you never guess who I pulled over and gave him a ticket. And I told her, and she just fell out laughing. But I mean, that was very freak. Like, I mean, I said I patrolled 3 cities, and for me to get him out of the 3 of them, all the people here, I was just like, okay. But it happens.
Well, how did you come to find out that it was him, your daughter's best friend?
He recognized me.
Oh, okay.
It was years since I had seen him, and he's all grown up now, full beard and everything. I didn't even pay attention to the name, because I don't really pay attention to people's names, and so that didn't catch my eye. And then I went back up to him. He said, "Hey, Trooper, is your daughter named? Or do you have a daughter?" I said, "Yeah." "Did she go to such a high school?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "I thought that was you. I thought that was you." He says, "Me, it's true." I was like, "Oh man, come on." I said, "Man,
you already started the ticket. It's already started."
It's done. He didn't sign it now, so it's hey.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if you got that original copy still though. You go.
I mean, I still got it. I mean, but yeah, boy, on the other side, supervisors don't like seeing a lot of boy tickets.
Oh yeah, I hear you.
I was like, "Yeah, man, just come to court, man. We'll take care of it." I wrote him reckless driving. I could have took him to jail, but it didn't. I wouldn't have took it that far. I mean, you can let him go, release him on a summons. But
he was just speeding or what? Reckless driving.
Yeah, it was reckless. It was reckless driving. It was reckless driving.
Oh, okay.
What was he doing?
Was it a combination of things?
No. Well, yeah, it was. He had a suspended license. and reckless driving. So I think it was 85 and a 60. If I'm not
85.
That's not bad.
but let me tell you something here. This
No,
is
it's
a good
bad.
old
No, I'm kidding, y'all.
You didn't
this is a good
start
old
him, son.
Commonwealth state.
You didn't got him started now. See, okay.
This Commonwealth state here, boy. If you now, it says 20 miles over the posted speed limit, reckless driving. So if you're 80 and 60, depending on what county you in, you probably going to jail. There's some counties don't play, but yeah, 85 for me, that was a little bit pushing the envelope. But yeah, you kind of core we can take care of.
Now, keep in mind, this is like a traffic guy that y'all talking about. Corey wrote a lot of tickets. That was his thing, right? For me, reckless driving, you got to have, unless you're going 100 miles an hour over, you know what I'm saying? You usually got to have at least 3 violations, speeding or moving violations for us to go reckless driving. But,
The troopers out this way, they will get you for reckless driving. We had so many people on probation for reckless driving. It's ridiculous. I'm like, really? They arrested you for
Let me
this?
tell you something about Texas.
Well, it's funny you say that. It's funny you say that because out in California, a lot of those DUIs get reduced to reckless driving.
Yeah, here too. Yeah.
That happens there too. Okay. So that's why you see that out here most of the time.
Well, no, I read the offense report and these people are speeding and they're getting probation. Like, what?
Right? Wow.
Yeah.
That's hardcore right there.
Yeah, let me tell you about folks in Texas. They get that act right juice when they get here over here to VA. Cause you're gonna follow our speed limits here. You're gonna get some of that act right juice. Don't come over here because in Texas, I don't think y'all obey speed limits over there, do you?
Excuse me.
It's a suggestion.
Then they passed that law where everybody can carry a gun in Texas, man. It's the wild, wild west out there now, right?
Hey, we rough and tough out here.
You are. You are. They tell I just got back from Texas probably about the middle of March. And in Houston area. We was down in Houston. And man, I'm sitting here, I'm doing the speed limit and I'm thinking I'm driving Miss Daisy. Like everybody was just blowing past me, like shoo, shoo. I'm like, where the state police at? Where the state police?
We have to avoid them like the plague. I don't like the troopers. No.
Yeah. That's why you go so fast.
Yep. Yes, you got it.
Hey guys, let's do, as we're starting to wrap up some, why don't you guys talk to us about the acronym CALM that you guys came up with? Talk to the family about that and why you think it's important. And don't be mad if me and Brittany play devil's advocate.
Oh, we love devil's advocate.
Yeah.
I like to play devil's advocate, so I know all about that. Go ahead, Corey. So you want to start that in.
Yeah, so when I asked Mike to do the show with me, I had came up with the acronym. I said, okay, what can be catchy that would draw people in and get them to understand as citizens, they also have a responsibility of how to interact with law enforcement. So I came up with the acronym CALM: comply, answer questions, listen, and move on. And when you break down a traffic stop, how a ideal traffic stop supposed to go, because you always hear the routine traffic stop word, and we all know there's no such thing as a routine traffic stop. But however, if you do these 4 basic things, comply, answer questions, and move on, there's no reason for you to have an altercation with the police officer, no matter what type of police officer you get, whether they're a butthole or they're, remind you of your grandfather back in the day. Whatever level officer you get on that traffic stop, if you comply, do as they ask you to do. If they ask you any specific question, answer truthfully, listen to their commands. If they ask you to get out of the vehicle, listen to what they're telling you about the violation, and then move on. Whatever move on should be, either getting that ticket and driving off, or if you had a violation which resulted in you being arrested and going to jail, so be it. You don't argue with them on the side of the road, because that's not where we're going to hold court. Somebody's going to lose in that. So you fight your battle in court. I mean, and the way it is today, I mean, if you are right and you were mistreated in there, whatever documentation you have for that stop, take it to an attorney. And I'm pretty sure if you got a legit case, somebody's gonna take that case for you. You sue the department, you get your money, and you ride off into the sunset. But the bottom line is, you got to move on. You are still alive. That officer is still alive. So we believe that if you listen and you comply to these 4 things, do these 4 things, you shouldn't have a problem.
But it sucks when you're dealing with an officer who, I mean, you feel like your rights are not being upheld, and you saying comply. It's like, you want me to comply with something and I think it's unconstitutional, or I may know that it is. How would you, I guess, what would you say to that person who feels like they're being wronged?
That's a great question.
Wait, real quick.
I'm sorry.
Before you answer that, just kind of tack on to what Brittany's saying. Like, you know, all right, you get pulled over. All right. You know, you get pulled over for whatever reason. Let's just say something. You were speeding, and we won't go crazy. We'll just say you're going 10 miles over the speed limit. We ain't gonna go to reckless driving. We gonna go just 10 miles over, okay? Mm-hmm. And you know, you have cops that, you know, whether it's just because of the way they've been taught to do it, or the way, you know, they've decided they want to do it, you know, they'll do stuff like, hey, you know, hey, turn the car off and give me your keys during the traffic stop, just on a regular traffic stop. And I know your answer is comply. That's what the C in calm stands for, is comply. Mm-hmm. To me, if I'm sitting there and, like, you know, even if I wasn't law enforcement and you're gonna tell me to turn my car off, okay, I might turn the car off. Give me your keys. No, that's theft. You're stealing my property. I'm not gonna comply with that. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, so how do you deal with those kind of situations where maybe the cop is just overstepping their boundaries, or they just, in their mind, they've developed a particular way they want to do it? Because there is no law that says I have to give you my keys on a traffic stop just because you asked for it. You know what I mean? So those are the kind of things we're asking about when they go overboard.
That's a good question. I think you got to look at it. Let me ask you this before I ask. If the officer took you, I'm gonna tell you why the officer.
I know why they do it. Oh, I know why.
Okay. And for our listeners, if an officer tells you to turn your car off, first of all, we don't know yet why he or she stopped you. It could be something going on. You might fit the description of something more serious that's going on, and you just happen to be stopped. We don't know all that, but not knowing all that, if an officer tells you to turn your car off and give me your keys, that's because he don't want you to drive away. He don't want you to all of a sudden get a wild hair up your ass, for lack of better words, and drive off. So he wants to take your keys to make sure you cannot drive off. He ain't going to keep your keys, obviously. He don't want your keys. He just wants to make sure you don't drive off. That's all. So the comply part is probably the most important aspect of communicating or interaction with police. Whatever the instruction is, even if you feel that it's not within their rights, like you can't do that, officer, or you can't do that, it's not important to start that argument on the street right there. What's most important is that even if you think it's wrong, or it's something you don't want to do, as long as he ain't putting a stick on your face or something like that, something crazy, it's more important for you to comply and do what they want you to do, whatever that is. And the reason being, because when you don't comply, you're starting to raise up red flags in an officer's mind. So if I tell you to turn your car off and you don't turn your car off, that's red flag number one for me. Like, okay, they refuse to turn the car off. An officer's mind is strictly thinking tactical. He's not thinking of a personal thing like, I don't like you. You see what I'm saying? So that's why I want you to turn your car off. He's strictly thinking tactical on everything he is asking you to do or telling you to do. If he's asking you to step out of the car, now I'm going to throw you something. If he's asking you to step out of the car, you can refuse. You can say, "No, I prefer not to step out of the car." You know, it all depends on how you communicate with that officer that lets him know whether or not you are someone that is need to go on their way or need to be investigated more, right? If he asks you to step out of your car and you say no, you are actually within your rights not to step out of your car. If he tells you to step out of your car, not asking, but he gives you an order to step out of your car, you have to step out of your car. Okay, that's case law. Case law requires that person. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's the Supreme Court case, Pennsylvania versus Mims.
That's right. And there's another one too.
Here's my issue with it is that the average citizen. I know that I'm in law enforcement. Okay,
right.
I read up on the laws. I read up on that kind of stuff. The average citizen doesn't know this. And I think that part of the problem with law enforcement on these traffic stops sometimes is that to them, and Corey, I know you can attest to this as a trooper, it's so routine to you because this is what you do day in and day out. You know all the rules, you know all the laws, you know the case laws, you know the actual state laws, you know all this stuff, okay? And to you, you're just trying to get in, get out, give your ticket, do what you got to do. If something raises some red flags, you might, poke around, investigate a little bit, whatever. But for the average citizen, they don't know all this.
That's right.
So when you ask them to go ahead and step out your car, Pennsylvania versus Mims says you got to get out of that car. The average citizen doesn't know that. I think part of the problem is that there's a lack of communication, and then it becomes comply or die. And that's part of the problem that citizens have to deal with. Now, on the other hand, with probation officers, 99% of our job is a lot of communication. That's mostly what we do. We talk to people, we try to change lives, we get to know them. They don't get to know us at all. They don't know anything about us. They know I'm married because I have to wear a wedding ring, but that's about it. You know what I mean? They don't know nothing else about me. And like I said, most of what we do is we talk to people. So that when we get to a point where we have to arrest them, we already have we had that professional relationship where it's, hey, come on, man. We knew this was going to happen. Let's just go ahead and get this out of the way. Let me take you down to the magistrate, put a bond on you, blah, blah, blah. But with law enforcement, like I said, I think there's a lack of communication on their part where they don't want to take the time to explain, hey, listen, I need you to get out of the car for this reason. The law says I have the ability to get you out of the car. Okay, as opposed to just, I need you to get out of the car. And then they start escalating. The natural response to anybody is to, whoa, hold on, slow down. Why are you making me do this? Start asking questions. And I think sometimes police take asking questions as non-compliance as opposed to that person doesn't understand.
Some officers may take that as go ahead, Corey.
No, that's what I say. One of our videos we did was entitled "Step Out of the Vehicle." Why? And when we go over this very same thing here, again, trying to hold court on the side of the road is not the time, right? So what we're trying to illustrate here, it's a two-way street, right? Law enforcement, police officer has their job to do, right? Citizen has their job to do too. We need to come together. I'm going to tell you why I'm asking you to step out of the vehicle. If you're a DUI, yes, I'm gonna tell you to turn that vehicle off. I'm gonna tell you to give me the keys, and I'm gonna place your keys on the top of the hood of your vehicle. That's where they will remain until we're done. You understand? And they will acknowledge. Right now, Mr. Chris, I need you to step out of this vehicle. Well, I don't want to get out. Well, either I'm telling you to get out the vehicle. This is where Mike was saying. I'm telling you to get out the vehicle, right? Well, why? Why do I need to get out? Well, I smell the sense of alcohol, and to make sure that you're safe to drive, I need you to step out of the vehicle. I'm administer a few tests, field sobriety tests on it, make sure you're good to go. All right, now step out of the vehicle. Right? Now you're gonna get out of the vehicle. If you don't, well, now you're telling all these red flags are going off. Now I got to get you out that vehicle.
Oh Lord. Now my heart's pounding.
Right? You're gonna come out of that vehicle because I don't have time for this on the side of the road.
Right.
I don't have time for this. Right? You're stopping me from continuing my investigation, which is to make sure you are good enough to drive down this road. Now, my question to be, why don't you get out of the vehicle? Because you know you drunk, probably. Or you got something in that car you don't want me to see. You don't want me to come across. Right? These are all the red flags that are going up. Now I got to get you out that vehicle. And then as soon as I put hands on you, sir, you can come on out the vehicle. I'm gonna escort you out the vehicle. You're gonna try to resist. And that's where it's game on. So that's where, hey, just comply. If you didn't do nothing, then comply.
Even if you did something, comply. Comply.
If you did something, comply.
I can't say that enough.
It is, you know.
Matter of fact, if you did something, even more so, comply. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna back it up a little bit, Corey, if you don't mind. I'm gonna back it up a little bit because I do understand what Chris is saying. The average citizen, they don't know all the case laws. They don't know what the officer can and can't do. They don't know those things. You see what I'm saying? And like Chris was saying, I do understand someone who has no knowledge of how to interact with police may have a negative response that can get them into trouble. And that's why number one, that's why we do this show, right? Because we want to tell people what they should do, no matter what kind of officer you come across, whether it's a good officer, whether it's a bad officer, whether it's a rude officer, whether it's a nice officer, whether it's a racist cop or not a racist cop. Comply is straight across the board. You always want to do what they tell you to do. And if you don't know that, learn these shows. And if you don't agree with it, if you don't agree with them telling you to do something, that's okay. Okay. What's important, though, is that you do it. Okay. Whether you agree with it or not, the time to argue about it is just not on the street. Because if you think about it this way, if I do a traffic stop on you and I have to spit out case law and explain to you on every little step that I'm telling you to do, and I got to explain to you and argue with you about whether or not I have a legal right to do it, we kind of wasting our time here, aren't we? I mean, it's unreasonable for an officer to have to explain every little single step and then debate about it on the street while I'm doing the traffic stop for whatever reason I stopped you for. You see what I'm saying? An officer isn't going to do that. They're not going to debate every little single step. Sir, I need you to get out of the car. Well, why do I need to get out of the car? Because this is why I need you to get out of the car. Well, I don't agree with that. I'm afraid I can't get out of the car. Okay, well, now we're in a stalemate here. Well, what's an officer going to do if you're in a stalemate? How long am I going to continue to explain to you, this is why I need to get out of the car? Or after I've explained it to you, maybe you don't accept my explanation. Now are we going to sit here on the side of the road and argue about it? Well, obviously not. I got to get you out of the car. Well, sir, I'm going to have to force you out of the car if you don't step out of the car on your own. I prefer you step out on your own. I do not want to have to put my hands on you. That's me personally as an officer. I don't want to have to put my hands on you at all. I don't want to. If I got to put my hands on you, then the only thing I want to do is cuff you and take you to jail. You see what I'm saying? Other than that, I ain't trying to put my hands on you. But I need you to do what I'm telling you to do so I don't have to force you to do it. That's all. Now, if you don't agree with it after the stop or the contact is over, then you can file a complaint with the police department. You say, he did this to me, he did that to me, he did that to me. I don't agree with it. I would like this investigated. No, they're required to investigate any complaint that comes across their desk. All officers, at least today, most officers have body cameras. In our department, we had a body camera on. We were required to activate that body camera on every contact we make for citizens, especially traffic stops. And that in our department, when you file a complaint like that on a traffic stop or any kind of contact, the first thing that watch commander is going to do is, I need to see that body. Let me see that body camera. In most cases, that watch commander will allow that citizen to come in and view. Would you like to come in and view this body camera footage with me so that you can point out what the officer did that you said was wrong? And then we can talk about that. You see what I'm saying? Now, I don't know if that's probably not a standard across the country. I understand that, but it was in our department. That was something common that took place. And most of the time, they look at that body camera and they can't justify or they can't explain why whatever they said the officer was doing turns out not to be the case, or whatever he did turns out to be justified. Okay, and then the complaint goes away because they sat down and looked at the camera. The point we want to make is, you don't want to argue and not comply while you on the street in contact with the officer, because everything you don't do that the officer is telling you to do sends up a red flag that something more might be going on here. You know what I'm saying? Or like Corey was saying, is there some reason you don't want to get out of the car? Are you actually planning on driving away because you know you got a warrant and I didn't run you yet? And you think you got a warrant, so you might try to take off when you get the opportunity to do so? Well, I'm going to take your keys, put them on top of this hood, or I'm going to take your keys to make sure you don't do that. And once I determine everything is on the up and up, here you go. Here's your keys back, sir. If I'm going to give you a ticket or not, okay, I'm done with the investigation. You move on your way. You know what I'm saying? So the first acronym, comply, is the most important of all. You got anything on that, Corey?
Yeah, you just, like I said, that's you got to do your documentation. Make sure as a citizen that you're making all your mental notes, and then take the correct course of action and file the complaint. Either go to the precinct and file the complaint, and over here it's pretty much the same way here. Our supervisors, once a complaint is made, they are obligated to follow through with that complaint and give a response back to the person making the complaint. So I would say it's, I don't know if it's consistent throughout the country, but I would say a lot of precincts probably do something according along those lines. But you can't, it's not worth trying to hold court on the side of the road. Yes, we know you're not going to know all case law and the laws themselves. But that's not for you to debate on the side of the road.
And again, something real quick, something else to add on to that too, though, on the officer side, what is important for the officer is, a good officer is, number one, going to know how to communicate with somebody like that. If they're going to say, I don't want to get out of the car, I think as an officer, sometimes you might have a legal right to get them out of the car, but you also need to consider whether or not it's worth it. You see what I'm saying? Whether or not it's worth getting into you gotta understand, if I'm just stopping you for a speeding violation and I'm pretty much convinced that that's all I have here, and I'm pretty much convinced that all I'm gonna do is write you a ticket, number one, I don't see any reason why I would ask you to get out of the car. So if that's all I'm going to do, or if I'm even just going to talk to you, sometimes you might have other occupants in the car that I stopped you, and maybe you are DUI, or I suspect that you are DUI because I smell alcohol in the car, or I smell marijuana in the car. Marijuana is legal, I know. However, you still can't drive under the influence of marijuana, obviously. So if I smell marijuana, I have to make sure that the driver is not high while he's driving, right? So that's another reason why somebody might ask you out of the car. But it's important for you as an officer to be able to communicate that with the person you're dealing with. Now, I ain't saying you got to argue with them. And I'm not saying that at some point you might have to go hands-on and get them out of the car, unfortunately. But there are some circumstances where, as an officer, I didn't want to be overzealous. I didn't want, if it wasn't that important to me as an officer. If it wasn't worth it getting into a physical confrontation with some over this violation, then I'm not going to do it, whether I have a legal right to do it or not. And I think you might come across some officers, Chris, that maybe jump the gun and take it too far. That doesn't mean that they weren't within their rights. Okay. I just think the end result turns out as an officer, in my mind, may not have been worth it. You know what I'm saying? So I understand that.
What he's talking about too, Chris, is what we're all trained on, is what, and maybe to you guys as well, we're trained on what's called verbal judo, right? What do I need to say to get you to comply with what I need you to do, right? And so quick, short commands, do these things. And remember, when you're not doing these things, that's all going to be laid out, hey, in court, especially if it's a traffic violation or whatever, DUI, because here, the judge is always going to ask the officer, hey, trooper, were they polite and cooperative with you? And if the answer is no, I'm going to lay it all out. Matter of fact, one time I had a gentleman call me every name in the book but trooper, and the name my mother gave me. And I had to go hands-on with him. And I laid it all out. He asked that question, trooper, was he polite and cooperative with it? And I kind of politely smiled at the judge and said, no, Your Honor, this is what he told me. And he laid it all out there. He's like, all right, troop, that's enough. I don't need to hear no more. Guilty. So complying goes a long way, right? Answering questions.
I just want to add that I just want to say that with the comply part needs to come, I think, the communication on the officer's side. I just think there are some officers out there that are comply or die. It's either you do what I tell you to do when I say to do it right now, or they're gonna escalate, which we all know because we're all taught you're supposed to de-escalate the situation. They teach us that in probation. I know they teach you guys that too. I think there are some officers out there that they do let the power of the badge go to their heads, and the same thing happened in probation. I have some officers that I've worked with in the past where I'll walk by their office and the way they talk to the offender, you know what I mean, just talking down to them. And I know Brittany's nodding her head because I know she's experienced it. We've talked about it before. And you're just like, right or wrong, whether they're violated or not, you don't talk to people like that. You know what I mean? And I think there are some officers that do kind of let the badge and the power go to their heads, and then they don't want to communicate effectively, or try to verbal judo, or try to de-escalate a situation. And it's either you do what I tell you to do, or they just jump to force. And you'll see, I've seen videos where we're talking about within 30 seconds of them starting traffic stop, they're already going hands-on with somebody. That's way too quick. There's no time to talk. There's no time. It's as soon as the person said no, or they asked them a question back, then it was just like escalate. But I mean, I totally understand comply, and I definitely agree with it.
Now, keep in mind what we're talking about is reasonable people. Like, we know both of you got stopped. You're going to do these things because you know the proper way to handle it, right? But a lot of times, most of the people that gave me flat and I had to go hands-on were people that never going to watch these videos. Right? I know. Right. They're criminals. They're criminals. They're violators. They're going to violate no matter what, no matter how you talk to them. But there are those out there that, they're good citizens, that they're law-abiding citizens may, feel, and that goes back to how media is portraying law enforcement. And remember what I said earlier, we can't let somebody else's perception be our reality. Right? So, when you start doing all these, thinking that you got in your head or your so-called rights, some people don't, be honest, and I know you guys know this in your line of work. A lot of these folks really don't know their rights. Look at Brittany. Go ahead, Brittany. Right? I mean, so, and I'm not going to stand on the side of the road and go through all of that with you. And sometimes, you know, I'm not going to, we know, Mike and I know they're bad apples out there. And they need to be dealt with accordingly. They're black and they're white. Right? It doesn't, evil doesn't discriminate with color. It's straight across the board.
I definitely understand where you come from too, though, Chris, because let me get back on my train of thought here. Communication skills. You do have some officers where I think the power goes to their head. You typically see that in young guys. The young officers that, you know, 5 years or less on the job, you typically see that they seem to approach people in such an authoritative way that they're just barking orders at. You see what I'm saying? And I think when you get more experience as an officer dealing with people on the street, you start to realize that your contact with someone usually, not all the time, usually should start off in a de-escalation manner, because most people are upset by you stopping them in the first place. People don't typically like authority. People don't like to be told what to do. As an officer, when you start to gain experience of dealing with people on the street, you know how you need to approach certain people. I agree in the sense that you don't need to be my way or the highway right out the gate. You need to, in other words, you need to ask before you order. You know, sometimes that's not always
my phone. Hold on. Go ahead. Say that one more time.
Sometimes you need to ask before you order. Not always. Sometimes you need to order before you ask. But on a normal contact, regular enforcement or non-enforcement contact, you need to ask before you order. And I have seen that amongst young guys or gals where they are just so stern talking to somebody. I need to do this. I need to do that. Do this, do that. It just comes across as too confrontational. You already in uniform. Some people feel that that's already confrontational. So you don't need to add to that unnecessarily. You see what I'm saying? For me, I was always one of those guys that I did like to explain to you why I was having you do that. I stopped you from running the stop sign. I like to take you right out the gate. I'll tell you why I'm stopping you. If it's an enforcement contact, I like to tell you right out the gate, this is why I stopped you. And what does that do? It turns into, well, yes, I did. I stopped, officer. No, you didn't. I'm sitting there watching. Well, I'm not going to debate. I said, now I'll have to skip over the conversation. And I'll say, okay, listen, I'm not going to argue with you, ma'am or sir. You did run a stop sign. I don't need to see your driver's license, registration, and insurance, right? Sometimes they'll continue to argue. Well, at what point we got to cut that off at some point. We can't stand there all day and argue with you. So I try to be non-confrontational and non-authoritarian initially, right? But there comes a time where you have to change over to that. But I agree with you. Communication is key. There are a lot of times that just simply how you talk to someone can determine whether or not that contact ends up as a hands-on contact or not. You know what I'm saying? I've come across some hardcore criminals, you know, just straight up, you know them, they all in the system, they know the deal, you know what I'm saying? Whether they on parole, probation, or whatever it is, or they just well known for either drugs or theft or whatever the criminal activity are. I'ma still approach them like a human. You know who I am. He or she knows who I am because maybe I've contacted them before, more than likely. Okay. But I'ma still talk to them in a normal way. I need you to do this. And this is why. I'll explain to them. I'm stopping you because you're on probation. You know you have a search clause, so you know I'm just going to search you while while I'm talking to you. And they already know why you searching them, how you can do that. You see what I'm saying? Average citizens, even more so, when you don't know anything about them and you know that they don't know the laws or they don't know what you can and can't do to them. And let's say they already have this perception of police that is negative right out the gate. Like, man, you stopping me because I'm black. Or, you know, that's a very common thing. Every black person you come across, sometimes that seems like that's going to be their main perception, is you stopping because I'm black, right? And more than likely, I didn't even see what color you were until I got up here to this window. You know what I'm saying? You got to talk to them. It's important how you communicate with them. And you got to know as an officer when you need to be authoritative and when you don't need to be authoritative. Like Corey was saying, it's all about getting them to comply even when they don't want to comply. And if you can do that simply by your words, man, that's an excellent officer right there. But understand it don't always work like that. An officer might have to put their hands on you right out the gate. Let me give you an example of that. If we get a call of a male with a green shirt, blue jeans, had a gun tucked in his waistband, and was threatening someone with it. Let's just use that as a loose call. I roll up in the area. I see a guy with a green sweatshirt and jeans on. I don't see a gun in his waistband because I just see the clothing description right out the gate. Well, when I see that, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get out. I'm not going to just be sunshiny and polite. I'm going to talk to that person as if he might have a gun. So what I mean by that is I'm going to give him more direct commands, more authoritative commands. Let me see your hands. Once I see that I can see his hands up like this, or if I go hands on, I might grab his hands. I might pat him down real quick or something just to see is this justified of what they're saying that you got a gun? You know what I'm saying? I might put him under some kind of control first, right? Because I don't want this guy, if he did have a gun, I don't want to be unsafe and just walk up to him like Willie Schmo saying, hey, you got a gun on you? You know what I'm saying? He might, yeah, boom. You know, he got a split seconds to pull that gun on me, right? So an officer has to take control of a situation like that more quickly, more authoritatively. And then once I got you safe, in a safe position, then let's talk. This is why I'm stopping you. This is why I'm stopping you this way. This is why when I saw you, I pulled up on you, I drew my gun on you, if that's the case. This is what I like to explain those things after I get you in a safe thing. Sometimes I've had it where I come up on somebody like that and they start asking questions immediately. Why are you stopping me? What's going on? What's going on? I'll tell them, and I'll quickly tell them, look, we got a call that you had a gun on you. You fit the description that quick while I'm in the same motion of making that person safe, whether it's handcuffing them, whether it's patting them down, whether it's having them sit down on the curb, whatever that safe is. That's what I'm doing, is making you safe. I want to make sure you're not a threat to me or a threat to someone else. And I obviously need to do that very quickly because this is what the call for service was. But that person that I'm stopping, he or she may not know that that's what that call for service was. Well, I don't necessarily always have the time to explain all those details at my initial contact. You see what I'm saying? Because in my mind, it's safety first. I want to make sure you're safe and you don't have a gun that you're going to pull out on me. So let me get you safe. Sir, this is why I'm stopping you for this reason. This is what I'm doing. I did it. Now he'll ask us, now listen, let me answer your questions. This is why I rolled up on you this way. This is why I handcuffed you. This is why this response was this way, because we got a call for service of A, B, C, and D. So a good officer is always going to explain him or herself once the scene is made safe. You know what I'm saying? Now that could come across as, you know, this cop, I'm just walking down the street and these cops just rolled up on me, guns drawn. I didn't know what was going on, had me prone out on the curb or on the roadway. That could happen. And unfortunately, that's not a good look, because to the public, they don't know all the details behind that. They just know what is shown on the video at that time, or what that person, what was in that subject's mind when they were stopped by the cops. So they don't know all that other stuff.
And it just looks like harassment.
It does.
Right.
It does.
So I mean, and I understand what you're saying, Mike. I really do. But from the outside looking in, because I'm looking at it from, like, I carry a gun every day on me. I'm always strapped. I always have it on me. Granted, I also usually have my badge with me, but it's always concealed. So
Mhm.
my thing is, if I'm that citizen where I'm just walking down the street and a cop just rolls up on me automatically, guns drawn, get on the ground. I don't know what's going on. I'm just walking my dog. I have no clue what's going on. And I understand from the officer's perspective is, okay, you got to call for service. Now we all know, and you guys know, not everything in that call is always true.
True.
All right.
True. But you gotta some things you better assume it's true until you prove otherwise. You see what I'm saying?
I just feel from my perspective is that it can be handled better than just pull up real quick, go real hands-on real quick, and then worry about explaining later. And I understand, like I said, I understand your position, but I'm also a person who likes to see things from other people's point of views. And if I'm that person who that thing is that is happening to, right? Whether I did something or I didn't do something, to me it's okay. I'm going to approach you. First of all, I'm going to radio it in. Hey, I got the subject over here with a green shirt. Let me get another unit. Code 2 or code 3, whatever the situation is, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
When I get out and make contact, I'm going to have my hand on my gun. I'm not automatically going to pull my gun unless he has a gun in his hand at the moment. Hey, my man, I got to talk to you real quick. Hey, can you just keep your hands where I can see them? To me, that's reasonable. I think the average citizen can deal with that. Hey, listen, we got a report. You got a gun. I'm gonna check you real quick, okay? To me, that's reasonable. But to just hop out the car automatically, hands in the air, get on the ground, just start grabbing people.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I think things look bad, because automatically what's gonna happen. Everybody's gonna pull that cell phone out.
Well, law enforcement ain't designed to be pretty.
But it
is designed. But I see what you're saying. But here's the thing: if I get that call like that, I'm not gonna allow you to be up on me, right? Because now I have to do the investigation to figure out if you got the gun or not. I will probably pull my gun out. I probably won't point it directly at you, but I will have it close to, if you do have a gun on you, until I can determine otherwise. I'm not going to let you get the jump on me.
And I understand that. If you want to have a strong hand grip, you know what I mean? I understand all of that. But I think it's sometimes it's overreaction.
Well,
I think it depends on the call for service that the officer is getting. I see what you're saying, how it could be an overreaction. Maybe the call for service that came out, like you said, maybe the guy never actually had a gun. And in that guy's mind, who never had a gun, that would be a perception that he would have, that this is an overreaction. I don't even have a gun. I can understand why that person would have that perception. He might have that perception, especially if you don't know nothing about how police operate or how the tactics that they use in certain calls. You see what I'm saying? I can understand that person having that perception, but that's why it's important that even if you have that perception, comply. Still do what they do, because you don't know what the perception of those officers have based on the call for service that came out on the radio or on their however they got it. You don't know what their perception is. It may seem extreme to you as the suspect or subject or whatever, the person who fit the description and all that. Okay. But it's important that you still do what the officers are telling you to do, because you don't know what the officers are thinking. You don't want them to think that you do have a gun. You don't want them to think that you are getting ready to do something that they don't want. So I understand what you're coming from, but that's a fine line that you got to find the balance. As an officer, if I pull my gun out on you, or if I pat my hand on my gun, that's because I'm protecting my safety first. So until I find out whether you got a gun, if you don't have a gun, I need to prove that before I act like you don't have a gun. You see what I'm saying? Because it was reported to us that you had a gun. So we're going to go off of that first. That's all.
I agree with you. And I think the key really is to try to find that balance. And I do think there are some officers that just overreact. And I don't know if that's just lack of experience, lack of training, always having that fear mentality. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I do think sometimes you have to strike a balance, because you always have to look at it from that citizen's point of view, that if they did nothing wrong, or they don't have a gun, or they are the wrong subject, how do they feel? How do they view what just occurred? Because in reality, that can happen to any of us.
True. And that's why it's important. That's why it's important that after they make that contact and they get that person safe, to me, that's why it's important for them to then explain why they had him like that, why they contacted him like that, so that he'll know. This is why I know you have a perception that we came overboard. For in my opinion, as an officer, as far as safety is concerned, it's never overboard. There's no situation overboard when safety is. If you talk about somebody with a gun or who threatens somebody with a gun, okay, there ain't no such thing as overboard. Your job as an officer is safety. You better handle that situation as if this guy has threatened somebody with a gun, because that was what was reported. Now, if I choose to pull my gun out on you, fine. If I choose to have my hand on my gun, whatever that individual officer feels that they feel is necessary, that's justified, because the call is a man with a gun threatening somebody with a gun. You see what I'm saying? That's all. But it's important to explain that to that guy, because you're right. His perception is going to be, look, man, I'm just walking down the street. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Sit him down, explain to him. I think a lot of officers don't do that enough right there on the scene. Explain to that person, this is why I stopped you this way. This is why I had you stick your hands out the window of the car. This is why I'm taking your keys from you just temporarily. This is why I'm taking that knife out of your back pocket and holding on to it while I'm contacting you. I will give it back to you when this contact is over. You see what I'm saying? It's important for officers to explain those things on the scene once they've made it safe.
This is what we're going to do, because I know my co-host. She's about to get. She's getting hungry. I can see it in her face. When she gets hungry, the podcast takes a turn for the worse. This is what we're going to do. Two Hats family, down in the comments or down on our IG page or in the IG page for the brothers-in-law. Go ahead and leave some questions. We're gonna do a part 2. We're definitely going to do a part 2 on this. Any questions you guys have that you've ever wanted to ask a probation officer, ever want to ask a police officer, leave those comments below. We'll compile them. You can leave the questions on their page, on their YouTube page, leave it on ours, leave it on either one of our Instagrams, and we're gonna compile all those. We're gonna do a part 2, guys. All right, because we don't want Brittany getting upset with us, especially when
please stop throwing me under the bus.
When she gets hangry, ooh, she's a totally different person. Everybody gets violent. Everybody going to jail. Everybody going to jail.
Brittany ain't getting out the car right now. She ain't getting out the car.
Right. Trust me, Brittany ain't getting out of the car. And she got that thing on her. And she want that thing loose.
I'm out, y'all. I'm out.
But hey, Mike, Corey, hey, we appreciate you guys being on today.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having
a great episode.
Thank you.
Definitely, everybody, remember, please make sure you guys follow them. The brothers-in-law, they're on Instagram. I believe they're on Facebook. Follow their YouTube page. Definitely, you guys can follow Brittany on her YouTube channel, Your Favorite PO. You can follow her IG page. You got everybody can follow the @Two Hats Podcast IG page. You guys can
I saw both of them. You got some good info in there. I saw both of them. Yeah. Good info in there.
You guys can follow me at the Tactical Probation Officer. There's some underscores in there somewhere. And as you guys know, I'm very selective on who I let follow me. So if you get denied, don't be mad.
Lord, y'all just follow me. Don't even try to follow Chris.
You can try, man.
Chris is like, no.
So just kind of keep that in mind. But hey, guys, we thank you again so much. This is a great conversation. We're definitely going to do part 2. Ask all your probation and police questions below. However you guys are listening to this, ask the questions. We will get you the answers.